Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel. Thanks for logging on. If you enjoy these videos, do me a favor and subscribe to our YouTube channel right here at Watchbox Reviews. I would really appreciate it, and I promise to update daily. If you love this watch, you can see it and you can purchase it on our website, thewatchbox.com. And today we are discussing the very first of the Rolex GMT Master IIs. This is the Rolex GMT Master II. 16760, sometimes nicknamed the Sophia Loren, a timepiece 40mm in stainless steel that marked the beginning of the true dual-time Rolex GMT Masters. Prior to the 1983 launch of this model, if you bought a GMT, you would use the bezel, not the movement, to distinguish a second time zone. With the GMT Master II, you now have the ability to set the local hour and the 24-hour hand separately and even use the bezel to discern a third simultaneous time zone. Now, the watch doesn't look all that different, but it did mark one significant aesthetic evolution, and that was the arrival of what would come to be known as the Coke bezel. We'll talk about that in a moment, and it's worth noting that this bezel was only ever the option, and I must say the mandatory option on this model, as there was never another color or combination available. But you can see on my wrist, it's basically a 5-digit Rolex GMT Master II. Although it is a little bit thicker than the 16710, you can't discern it on the wrist. You really need to take a caliper to it. So it's not freakishly fat despite its reputation. Now, the watch is 12.5 millimeters thick, which is perfectly acceptable for a watch that'll fit under a shirt cuff. Between the lugs, it's 20 millimeters if you want to accessorize. And from lug to lug, 47.5 millimeters is the measurement. Now, this timepiece features a serial number of about 9.3 million, which puts it right on the cusp of 1987. It was either one of the last of the 86s or one of the first of the 87s. And of course, later in 87, we would see the beginning of the alphanumerics with the R code Rolex timepieces. This was prior to the alphanumerics and one of the last. The bracelet is actually a later example. 93150. It's a reference often seen on the Rolex dive watches. It features 501 end pieces and a Rolex flip lock, as you can see, dive style extension. So you have a couple of different anchoring points for the clasp, and you can see they really do give you quite a few options. Even then, all of the removable links were fixed by screws, and the Oyster bracelet has always been a good choice because for sporting use it vents the wrist quite nicely. You can see those gaps in the links without becoming ropey. Now, with vintage watches, I always insist on filming them individually because they are individuals. They are no longer standard. Having seen 3 decades, this watch is no longer as it left Geneva. None of them are. So I always want to highlight the strengths and the weaknesses of each vintage timepiece. You can see the strength of this one is that the lugs are wonderfully full, and you'll appreciate the fact that there is no protrusion of the spring bars past the strap tool apertures. That's always a red line for me when looking at a vintage Rolex. The clasp itself is in very good condition. As you can see, these older Oyster clasps use clamshells, and you can see that there's plenty of depth left to the molding of the stamped clasp, as well as the raised Rolex 5-point coronet. This one's in good shape. And the case itself features most of the original metal. As you can see, the transition between the hood of the lug and the flank of the case is still sharply defined. One hasn't rounded into the other. The crown guards still present, correct, and a full volume and shapely. You can see that the timepiece features a screwed-in case back, so nothing to see back here, but underneath, an important milestone mechanically for Rolex. 27-jewel automatic caliber 3085, the first of the true dual-time GMT Master movements. It's an Oyster perpetual bidirectional winding, 4 Hz beat rate, so it was one of the first high-beat Rolex movements, 28.8, and it does feature both hacking seconds and a COSC chronometer certification. So in daily use, it's going to be like any other Rolex movement. 48-hour power reserve, hacking seconds. You have the ability to use that dual time function. And of course, this generation of case helped to usher in the 100-meter water-resistant GMTs. The watch also featured a sapphire. It was only ever made with the sapphire crystal. Remember, the 16750 did feature a plexiglass, only ever made with the sapphire crystal and the Coke style bezel. Now, the Coke bezel, it's a funny nickname, but it's more subtle than the Pepsi. First, because the tones are closer, the black and this crimson red, they're a lot closer in color, and they're actually keyed to the dial, which I find to be complementary and aesthetically consonant in a way no Pepsi is, with the exception of the quasi-mythical blueberry, and we've featured that on the channel before. The timepiece features all white gold applique indices. These were never made with printed dials. These were all white gold hand, white gold index dials, and you can see that this is a later Rolex service dial, as it doesn't feature the tritium signature at 6 o'clock. So this watch features a 1991 code inside its clasp. The code is P, so the bracelet is 1991 along with the clasp, and you can see that this one features a later service dial from Rolex, along with what is likely a service bezel, though the bezel and the dial are both correct to the watch. The timepiece, very much a modern Rolex. 100 meters water resistant, 48-hour power reserve, high beat rate, hacking seconds, sapphire crystal. It's a vintage watch that has a good deal of potential as a future investment. Even some of the watches that have had service dials, service bezels, still represent good buys in the market because this is an historic milestone watch. And I can tell you that if there were something like a Rolex 6200 Submariner in this condition, no one would care that Rolex had put a bezel or a dial on it. And as these get older, all boats rise. But this is one you can wear without fear, and I recommend getting on board because this is a lovely and short-lived reference made from 1983 to 88 that represents the first of the GMT Master IIs. See it and make it your daily driver or daily flyer on the watch box. Rolex 16760, as promised, Luminova service dial.